Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, what to make of the Democratic and Republican conventions, and who has Big Mo going into September. Shocking new report reveals that less than half of MCPS third graders can read at grade level. Parents want to know whom to blame. COVID. Less than 1% of Marylanders have tested positive for the coronavirus. Isn't it time to fully open the state? Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the Dean of Democratic Politics, Sam Statland. Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher. Chairman of the Maryland Republican Technology Committee, Dwight Patel. And political strategist, Susan Heltemes. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. And welcome back. If politics, and presidential politics in particular, were a boxing match, this would be the heavyweight championship bout of the century. In the corner to the left is the contender, Joe Rope-a-Dope Biden, and in the corner to the right is the current and undefeated president of the United States, Donald the Dealmaker Trump. But politics isn't a boxing match. Politics is about presidential contests and a presidential election, and we've got a serious contest coming up for us in November. Sam, gone are the days of the smoke-filled convention and backroom politics, replaced by the age of virtual meetings and pre-recorded presentations. Which party handled these technical challenges the best?
Obviously, Democrats did a much better job than the Republicans. They were prepared. They had all of the camera work going. They had their timing down. They had great speakers. They had interaction with folks from all over the country. The common man was speaking for the Democrats. They have momentum. They have momentum not only within the party, but also with great folks and good Republicans who are supporting Biden, as well as athletes and all walks of society. This is going to be a big time Democratic win.
All right, Sam. I'm glad you're pumped. You're pumped up, man. Susan, the Democrats spent a lot of time calling for unity during their convention. Will the addition of Senator Kamala Harris be like many vice presidential choices, headlines for a few days, and then forgotten? Or will Senator Harris play a more prominent role in this campaign?
Well, she's certainly going to be more helpful than Sarah Palin was. But as a biracial woman, I think that she is definitely going to appeal to women who thinks it's about time that a woman is in the White House, as vice president or president, but she is an articulate, smart, capable woman. I must say, though, from the perspective of the Democratic convention, I was impressed that, masks were worn, socially distant. They didn't break any hatch acts, and they talked about substance. That's what's important. And they talked about issues.
Susan, I got a question for you. You seem so excited about the selection of Senator Harris as the vice presidential nominee. Is Miss Senator Harris going to be the president in waiting for Joe Biden wants to step down?
I think that really is inappropriate at this time. Joe Biden is the presidential candidate. We accept that. Kamala Harris is there, and she has a lot to offer. Anytime any president goes into office, the vice presidential candidate and then vice president is always there to replace the president if necessary, just like Mike Pence is there to replace the president if he went to jail or whatever. There you go.
There you go. Didn't notice there was any mention of the impeachment at the Democratic convention. Mark, the Washington Post called the Democratic platform the most progressive platform ever. How will the Biden-Harris team win over the American people who aren't quite that progressive?
Well, I think you put your finger on a key point, which was the focus of the convention was a sort of personal attack on Trump. And I get that. He certainly is a figure for whom there are lots of people who like him and lots of people who don't like him. But there was less talk about some of the specifics of, what we'll say, the Green New Deal and some of the foreign policy differences that there exists between the Republicans and the Democrat. And I think that's a conversation that we'll have between now and November.
Dwight, the Republican convention focused on everyday Americans. For example, a dairy farmer who praised President Trump for saving her dairy farm, a lobsterman who praised President Trump for reopening fishing waters off the coast of Maine. And these were the individuals who made the case for the president's reelection. Was this the best way to address and connect with the voters?
Oh, absolutely. I think it was genius. I think in addition to that, the live swearing in of the new Americans the other night by the president, that was great. I mean, we've had the last 3 days have been a much better convention. I'm not sure which convention Sam saw, but from the Democrats' so-called well choreographed event, I mean, we've blown the doors off their convention at this point. I mean, night one we had some great speakers. We had Tim Scott, Herschel Walker. We've had even Nick Sandman was great, and I think we've had A-list speakers. I think we're focusing on the everyday people, opposed to the elitists that the Democrats want to focus on, the elitist college-educated folks, that live on the East and West Coast. We're focusing on America, and I think this is why the president will sail into victory. The fact that a couple things. One, Americans are they don't hate this country. If you watch the Democrat convention, it was like, oh, this sucks, that sucks, we all suck, our greatest days are behind us. People like to be positive, looking forward, very Reagan-esque, or like Governor Allen in Virginia, very positive. That is our convention. The Democrats were very pessimistic and, everything sucks, and.
Well, let's go back to the Democrats and see what their reaction is to some of the things.
I have to.
Sam, I'll get to you in just 1 second. I have a question for Susan, and then I'll get to you. Susan, you mentioned in your statement a minute ago that the Democrats wanted a great deal of specifics, and Mark, when he responded, said that the Democrats did not go into a great deal of specifics during the convention. So the question is, was the focus of your convention on rehashing of how awful President Trump was?
No, and I don't know.
Setting a platform for leadership and policy.
Well, at least there is a platform. For the first time in 160 years, the Republicans don't have one. It is not progressive. I don't know how anybody could say that we are far to the left. And yes, they did talk about issues ad nauseum. They talked about how they would deal with COVID. They talked about how they would work with election security. They talked about the post office. They talked about energy, the environment, racial injustice, and how they would approach those. They talked about environmental changes. They talked about childcare. They talked about renewing foreign alliances.
Those are all mainstream issues?
They are. Those are all mainstream issues. I mean, as Governor Newsom said, it was 130 degrees that week in Death Valley. We have a problem with the environment. And it must be good enough because in Maryland alone, Connie Morella, Wayne Gilchrist, and Michael Steele have all signed on saying that the platform is not extreme and that they support it. In the case of the Republicans, the Trump team put out 50 or 60 bullet points. And Trump couldn't even say what they were. At least we are there and we talked issues. And when you talk about the ordinary people, the role of the states.
Got to leave some
Clearly, Susan continues to believe in the filibuster.
Yes.
That's right.
Sam, I told you I'd go to you next.
Guys I don't know what any of you all were watching, except of course for Susan, but what I'm hearing from the commentators across the aisle, including Fox, was that the Republican campaign has been very, very negative compared to a positive future for the Democrats and Biden.
Mark. Respond to that, because there was this claim that immediately that the first night of the
Well,
convention.
full disclosure, Casey, I was elected to be on the platform committee for Maryland, one of the two representatives for the Republican convention. We took Susan's advice, and normally the platform is a multi-day process with a lot of folks, and made the choice to take essentially not have a platform, but to take the platform from 4 years ago and carry it forward. It's not optimum, but I do think it expresses a lot of the same aspirations that we're going forward, and certainly expresses a very clear difference, a clear comparison that can be drawn between what the Republicans are proposing and what Democrats are proposing.
Except that's not true, because Trump declined to support that platform you're talking about. And he and Kushner presented a 50 or 60 bullets. And when asked what they were by the press, Trump said, I don't know, but that's what we're following. So there is no platform.
On the platform committee, answer the question.
Yeah, let me, Susan, you just don't have the facts right on that.
Well, that's what I
here's what we've had all along, and this is a classic example of what the Democrats are trying to do. This isn't a discussion about the difference in the issues. This is simply a personal attack on Trump. Let's talk about in which you identify problems, and we certainly can agree that there are issues that need to be addressed in this country. But what we haven't heard is, tell me what Joe Biden's signature domestic policy initiative is going to be. Is it the Green New Deal?
No, what he said was nothing is going to happen until we resolve the COVID issue. And everyone, including Fox News, has said that the president has blown this. So that is his number one issue.
Susan, I mean,
has the whole country been infected? What has been blown?
Well, over 180,000 people are dead. That's pretty serious.
Susan, you know what a pandemic even is? The fact that the virus is all around us, and it's a worldwide pandemic. No one man can prevent another person from being infected. It's impossible.
No, but he could show leadership. He could show leadership in mitigating the seriousness.
He has.
Sure. Let me. Sam. So in January, the end of January, when President Trump stopped the travel between China and the United States, one of the first steps, this is back when the CDC was saying, masks won't help. Obviously, things change as we learn more. The response of the vice president at that time was, right at the same time, was to attack the president for being xenophobic and fear-mongering.
Well, gentlemen, and lady, we are getting lost in the weeds here because we're getting far astray of what happened at the convention and the two conventions. The big question now is, who is going to come out of the convention with the most positive way, and who's going to be strongest going into September? And I'm going to start with you. We have 2 minutes for this. I'm going to start with you, Sam.
Well, to me, Casey, it's kind of obvious. Of course, you could say I'm biased. But the person who's going to come out way ahead of this is Biden. Biden is going to come out ahead. When we talk about one major defining issue out of this convention, it is COVID. And it is what's happening with COVID. And it is the opinion of the American people that the president did a terrible job.
All right, Sam, you got to go on. Dwight.
Yes, I will say, I am a Republican, in full disclosure. I think the Republicans had a much better convention. The president is going to come off looking a lot better. We won't hear that from CNN or MSNBC because they're going to spin it as blah, blah, blah. President Trump's message was of prosperity and looking forward, and that's what Americans like.
All right, Mark.
I absolutely agree. I mean, we elect the president for 4 years, and all we hear from Joe Biden is he's going to address the COVID issue. Hopefully there's a vaccine before he's even inaugurated.
Susan.
I think that after the Republican convention, the Americans are going to realize that Trump is not a monarch and that the White House is not their castle, and that you can't break the Hatch Law, and that Joe Biden is a centrist who will bring all people back together and end the divide in our country. And Joe Biden will come out on top.
Thank you, Susan. All right, when we come back from this short break, there's a shocking new report that concludes that half of Montgomery County public school students, all third graders, can't read. Parents are demanding answers. Stay tuned when we come back from the short break. And welcome back. First reported in Bethesda Beat magazine, a new statewide report reveals that half of the approximately 23,000 third grade students in the Montgomery County public school system cannot read at their grade level. This shocking report comes in the midst of debate over the negative effects of keeping schools closed in the fall. Sam, this is a stunning condemnation, of MCPS, and who's to blame?
Casey, the whole school system is to blame, and our elected officials. I love it when a new report comes out giving this information. What about last year's report, and the report before that, and the report before that, and the one before that? For the past 20, 30 years, it's always been the same. Yes, we have a problem. No one is addressing the problem. It needs to be addressed. And it breaks down not only into who's being affected, but where they're being affected, which in ways goes to this election. Who's in and who's being left out. Obviously, we have a problem, and the only way that it's going to be resolved is to get all of our peers involved with this to sit down and say, definitely, we are going to do this, and then follow a path. And we have not done that in the past. And things look dim in the future.
Well, I think the parents should be outraged by this report, because it impacts everyone and all of the students across the county. Mark, what can be done about it?
Well, I have firsthand experience with this, having had kids in the Montgomery County school system that had learning issues. And we were in one of those sort of upper scale school districts. We were in the Whitman district. Our son was not reading at grade level, was well behind. And the solution that we came up with was to go to Sylvan Learning System, which was an outside vendor that cost a lot of money. And school system said, no, we can't do it. And probably, he's not going to learn as well. Now, I will tell you that within 6 months, Peter was able to jump 3 grade levels. Specifically, what Sylvan uses is a phonics method. And that's not what was the approach. This was 20 years ago that MCPS was using. Many of the Sylvan instructors were moonlighting MCPS teachers. They were just using a different approach. Now, I want to acknowledge, to Sam's point, there's an inequity to that, because that cost a fair amount of money that wasn't paid by the school system, that was paid by the parents. And that's what happens, and accounts for a lot of the social equity problems that the school system has, is because parents in our school system are expected, they have to substantially supplement the education of their kids, or they won't get the results they want. So we've known about this for a long time, as Stan says, but the problem is MCPS has a one-size-fits-all approach and is not flexible to be able to accommodate the variety of learning styles that students have.
And one-on-one teaching is always helpful. However, if you looked well into this story, again, it is the southern part of the county that is having the most issues, where the poor people are and where immigrants are. And that is another issue we're not addressing.
Because doesn't this dovetail nicely into the whole story and concern about reopening of the schools, and how
Absolutely.
wealthier families are creating learning pods where they're hiring private tutors? Doesn't this really challenge the efficacy of the entire MCPS school system, Dwight?
Yes, it absolutely does. And I think MCPS should be indicted, as should be the Board of Education members on this. This has been going on for years, as Sam has mentioned. They've been throwing money at this problem. I think, what is it? Last check, it was about $14,000 to educate a student. in Montgomery County Public Schools and they can't read on the grade level, it is an outrage. And honestly, the buck stops with Mark Elric and the president of the Board of Education. It stops with them. They're the problem. I think we need to get the bureaucrats out of the classroom, let the teachers teach the students, and basically go back to basics and stop teaching new math, new history, and why Susie's got 2 mommies, you know.
Okay, and Casey, I just want to add in terms of schools closed, I don't think there is a public school system in the whole state who's starting in person. So this isn't a Montgomery County phenomenon.
Right, Susan. That just because we're following the herd.
Have you been watching schools around the country? Schools around the country that have opened have closed almost as fast. There aren't any schools that are staying open.
Susan,
Florida
schools are open,
problem
in-person
that goes
learning.
well beyond whether or not the schools reopen in the fall. This is a condemnation of the entire Montgomery County public school system. For 30 years, they haven't served the needs
That has
of southern
nothing to
parts
do
of
with
the county.
COVID.
They haven't served the poorer communities in this county because of elitism and not addressing and being honest about the issue.
And
We gotta wrap it up.
the exception is our county executive. Mark is the only executive I've ever seen to take down MCPS and blame them for their problems.
Sam, you got the last word on that. Stay tuned for parting shots. And welcome back. Now with parting shots, Susan Heltemes.
Another black man was killed in Wisconsin this week by a police officer. And Clippers coach Doc Rivers talked about the fear that blacks have and how they love America but are not loved back. These things are not being mentioned at the Republican convention. President Trump is the president now, and this is the problem he needs to solve. He helped create it. The shooters, both of the police officer in California and the young people in Kenosha, were done by supporters of this president, a Bugaloo boy and a guy who was in Iowa at a Trump rally. Words, tone, and the truth matter.
Thank you, Susan. Sam Statland, your parting shot.
Well, after that wonderful article in Bethesda Magazine, there's only one candidate for my parting shot. And I know I sound like a broken record, but come on, folks. We're talking about the education of our children here in Montgomery County. And guys can't read at the 3rd grade level. Could you imagine these guys when they're 18, 19 coming into your office applying for a job? It just doesn't work, and it hasn't worked. Get your act together, Montgomery County.
Thank you, Sam. Dwight Patel, your parting shot.
My parting shot goes out to all the hardworking folks at various restaurants around the county who've been open, and they've been basically working through the crisis. And a lot of these restaurants are shutting down. We just saw that Mrs. K's Toll House, iconic restaurant in downtown Silver Spring, I'm sure Susan is familiar with it, is not open yet. And I think I fear to say they're probably never going to open again.
Thank you, Dwight.
Thank you, Mark Elric.
Mark Uncapher, your parting shot.
Thank you. There was some controversy. We heard a little reference to it today about the use of Fort McHenry as a venue for the convention. I think it's an important role for our conventions to lay out a agenda for the future for campaigns. And so what I'd like to do is encourage Vice President Biden to rent out McHenry as well and lay out his agenda, how he's going to reduce the murder rate in Baltimore and around the country.
Thank you, Mark. Now today, as we're taping this, it's August 27th, 2020. 244 years ago, only 6 weeks after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, was the Battle of Brooklyn. Some call it the Battle of Long Island, the Battle of Brooklyn. The one pivotal question about the battle was it was the almost absolute defeat of the Continental Army and George Washington. The Maryland 1st Regiment was tasked with an unenviable task. They were tasked to protect the rear guard action and allow Washington to escape across the river into Manhattan. These brave men did so. At the cost of their lives, there were very few that escaped. The rest were held captive in ships, prison ships in the harbor. I want to thank the 1st Maryland Regiment and the Maryland 400 for guaranteeing our freedom and saving Washington on that very important day. For Casey Aiken, I'm 21 this week. Thanks for watching Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show.